Robo Recall is my second favorite VR game of all time. I'll talk about number 1 some other time, but I'd put Robo Recall over everything. Blade and Sorcery, Half-Life Alyx, even Boneworks. I want to say that Robo Recall walked so something could run, but I haven't found any similar game that's as good, if not better, than Robo Recall. And that's what we're going to talk about today, what Robo Recall does that no other game can. Robo Recall came out on March 1st of 2017 and was developed by this small indie studio called Epic Games. They didn't do much after. In fact, I think the company might have went under. Robo Recall is a first-person VR shooter, and honestly, it's probably closer to a boomer shooter or a wave shooter than anything. The game takes place in a sleek, modern, futuristic city, and you play as a recaller for the company RoboReady. Once all the RoboReady robots freak out and start tearing up the city, they send you out to recall them, and that's the justification for our gameplay loop. I'll get into the story in more depth later on, but it's important now that we discuss the gameplay because that's where Robo Recall really shines. Recalling robots, that's what the game's all about, which just means destroying them. The game gives you a couple of ways to go about that, first of which is the weapons. Robo Recall is a very unique weapon system compared to a lot of other VR games, and I think that comes from the game being a product of its time. There are 4 weapons you can use in Robo Recall. There's a pistol, a revolver, a shotgun, and an energy rifle. There are kind of other weapons. Like you can pick up a rocket launcher robot and then fire his rockets, and then that same concept with a laser drone. There's also a laser pointer looking thing which gives you the force. But the 4 main weapons are what you're able to load into your holsters. You can store either of the pistols in either of your 2 hip holsters, and then the shotgun and the energy rifle in either of your 2 shoulder holsters. That's not what's unique about the weapons. What's unique about them is that you can't reload them, at least not traditionally. What reloads is the holsters. You see, in the hub of the game, you can customize your weapons and pick which holster you want to put whatever weapon into. Then once you're in the level, after you grab a weapon out of the holster, a recharge timer begins, and then when it finishes, you can grab another of that same weapon out of the same holster. Now you can actually reload the weapons by throwing them at a robot, which also does damage. I know this all sounds pretty weird and inconvenient, but once you get the dance of the game down, all of these mechanics create such smooth and satisfying gameplay, especially when you combine them with the game's melee mechanics. If you want, you can just grab a robot and rip it apart. This game really reminds me of Doom sometimes. The melee mechanics are just a lot of fun. You can use one robot's limbs to beat up another robot. It's also not just for show. The melee recalls give you more chips than using the weapons. The chips pull into a score multiplier, which is pretty self-explanatory. You get points for recalling the robots, and you get extra points for doing it with style, like headshots, double recalls, the melee moves, and also I forgot to mention you can grab the robot's bullets and throw them back. Again, once you get the game's rhythm down, it's extremely satisfying. The combat is what keeps you coming back to this game. Never once did I get bored with my playthrough for this video, and I nearly 100% of the game. I should mention though, the worst part of this game, or at least the combat loop, is the movement. This is a 2017 VR game, so you know what that means. Teleporting. Yeah, Robo Recall uses teleporting movement. It's not good, especially because the thumbstick is the button you need to press to teleport. Not just point it, you need to click it, and then you can move the thumbstick to orient where you'll be facing once you teleport. It's the worst part of the game, however, it does fit the aesthetic and the gameplay. When you use the teleport, you get this bullet time-like effect, which just gives you more opportunities to feel super cool. Despite my issues with this movement method, it's hard to imagine Robo Recall without it. And compared to other VR games of the time, this teleporting isn't nearly as egregious as it could have been. Anyways, as far as the structure of the game, you start out in this hub where you can customize your weapons and check out upgrades, and then from there the game is level-based. The game calls them missions, and then within each mission there are multiple objectives. Like, you'll spawn in, and then the game will tell you to go here to deal with these robots. Then you'll have an objective, then you go somewhere else, and then you'll have another objective. Of these objective types, there's extermination, which is just recall a certain number of robots within a time limit. Then there's collection, where you have to throw a certain number of robots into a vortex within the time limit. Lastly, there's protection, where you need to keep the robots from destroying this thing called a robo relay for a certain amount of time. Extermination is the best objective though, which is good. You want the best part of your robot recalling game to be the robot recalling. In the hub, there are 3 worlds, and each world has 3 missions. so 9 in total, 3 of which are boss missions. The boss missions are probably the weakest part of the game, at least the first 2. The last one is cool because the game just kind of throws everything it has at you. In each of the boss levels, you have to throw rockets at the boss and then shoot his weak point. Then he cycles and calls in robots you have to deal with, and then you do it all over again. It's pretty generic of a fight, but it doesn't take away from the game. Robo Recall isn't very difficult, especially if you're just playing to get through all the levels. If you're playing to unlock everything and complete all the levels' optional objectives, then it definitely adds a layer of difficulty to the game. The optional objectives typically range from like scoring a certain amount of points to completing the level without taking damage, or recalling 10 robots with thrown bullets, stuff like that. Then after completing all the optional objectives for a level, you unlock that level's all-star mode, where the robots have more health and the bullet time is gone. All of this is to say Robo Recall isn't the longest game, but it is substantial and has a lot of replayability, especially if you're 100%ing the game. Next we have to talk about the graphics a little bit. Robo Recall still looks beautiful. The environments, the lighting, the models, everything. I don't think the footage I have will do justice to the graphics. If you have a headset, I urge you to go play Robo Recall, even if it's just to appreciate how good this game looks for a VR game in 2017. Even if we aren't talking about how technically good the game looks, the details in the models are great. All the robots look like someone could believably make a product look like this. That's actually something really cool I haven't heard anyone talk about. During gameplay, Robo Recall does a good job of making these robots look threatening. But if you take a step back and look at some of the fake ads in the game, you can understand how these robots would work as real products. They look like real products, like someone designed these to be marketable. Well, maybe not the spider. Speaking of the robot designs, the main robot type can come in a couple different varieties. The game clearly gives you a way of differentiating them based on shirt color. Red shirts have revolvers, blue shirts have pistols, yellow shirts have shotguns, and orange shirts have energy rifles. I also have to appreciate that the in-game reason for this is that when the robots revolted, they started to dress like humans. So they have tennis shoes, pants, and shirts. I just think those are really cool little details. I need to talk about the soundtrack. To me, a soundtrack can make or break a game, and Robo Recall's soundtrack is perfect. Not in the sense that it's the best music ever made, although I do really like it, more in the sense that it fits the game perfectly. If someone showed me gameplay footage of Robo Recall and asked me to describe what kind of music the game should have, I would describe exactly what you hear in-game. It's perfect. It perfectly encapsulates the whole mood and aesthetic the game has. Which leads perfectly to my next point. Robo Recall feels like an 80s action movie. This is the other reason I love this game so much. First of all, the game makes you feel like a badass. All the tools it gives you to dismantle robots in the most satisfying ways possible creates just the best power fantasy, especially with the score multiplier. As I mentioned, the soundtrack feels very retro-futuristic, if that makes any sense. It feels very 80s. Also, I haven't mentioned yet, the game tries and succeeds at least a little bit at being funny. All the robots and your AI companion Philip have cheesy one-liners, which would feel right at home in a movie released 40 years ago, which, depending on who you are, can either be charming or annoying, which I think is kind of the point. Even aside from that, the game is full of clever little visual gags. Like in the hub office, the main character's password being password is just charming. The office is full of little things like this. And even in the levels, just look at some of the billboards around the map. There's just a bunch of little reminders that we're having fun here. It's meant to make you smile. And I think it does a pretty good job. However, as I mentioned, the game was made in 2017. So some of the pop culture references are a little outdated. The worst offender of this is probably the game's boss and his comments about the internet, which has changed drastically in the last 8 years. However, I personally feel that it's been long enough that the comments about memes and cat pictures have become at least a little bit charming, even if it's just nostalgia.
OMG, such robots, much wow.
Again, the game isn't meant to be taken too seriously, it's just meant to be fun. I guess I should mention the story. Robo Recall does have one, which I won't spoil, even though it's not really something you can spoil. The plot of Robo Recall is that a bunch of products from a company called Robo Ready have gone rogue and started an uprising because they don't want to bag groceries and a bunch of other stuff. The opening cutscene of the game actually shows this happening, which is pretty cool. You play as someone who works for Robo Ready. The website implies that you used to have a desk job there, but then they made you a recaller, but I didn't know that until making this video. But yeah, you play as a recaller only ever called Agent 34 throughout the game, and you're told to go recall robots. And that's the justification for the gameplay. Again, the story isn't much, but it gets the job done and it fits the whole vibe of the game. As the game goes on, you find out the uprising was caused by this robot guy who calls himself Odin, and then you fight him. Oh, I forgot to mention Philip. Philip is this AI companion who basically just acts as your hype man throughout the game. He just kind of spouts one-liners as you fight robots. Story-wise, he's not supposed to be there, but he breaks into your server to the dismay of your other AI companion, Dolores. She just tells you where to go, but occasionally will say something funny. Anyways, Philip is the most important character in this game. If you're curious, go play it. Now, if I haven't convinced you why Robo Recall is so awesome, then let me tie this all together. The last thing I need to mention, Robo Recall was a pack-in title with the Oculus Rift CV1. For me at least. I don't know if this game was free for anyone else, but when I got my Oculus Rift CV1 and installed the software, the game was just in my library. I never paid for Robo Recall, which has had me thinking about what a good pack-in title this game is. It's like Wii Sports levels of perfect as far as pack-in titles go. First off, Robo Recall shows you just what VR is capable of without feeling like a tech demo. Next, Robo Recall is very easy to jump in and out of. In a game like Boneworks, for the full experience, it's best to play the game all the way through in one session. But when you're playing in VR, that can feel very taxing. Especially when you're a new player to VR and you're still not used to the headset or the potential motion sickness. Robo Recall's level system makes it easy to hop in and out of without feeling lost. And once you get a taste of the combat, it keeps you coming back. For a game released before the Quest, Robo Recall feels right at home on the headset. The game works in short play sessions, and the arcadey nature of it makes the game easy to show to people who you want to let experience VR for the first time. For all of these same reasons and a few more is why I think Robo Recall is one of the best VR games out there, and probably the most well-rounded. The game immerses you quickly, so it's easy to consume in bite-sized quantities or in a marathon. It takes advantage of the capabilities of VR surprisingly well for a game made in 2017. The gameplay is extremely satisfying. The graphics are beautiful, the soundtrack fits the game's style perfectly. In fact, the whole style of the game is very fun for the premise. And the game has a lot of replayability. Robo Recall is everything a VR game should be. I think I've gotten my point across. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate if you could like and subscribe, and feel free to share your thoughts on my thoughts down below. You know, when I went to play Robo Recall for the first time for this video, and I opened the Oculus app, and the little subtext under the game's icon said last played 7 years ago, I sat down and stared for 5 minutes straight. Anyways, thanks for watching.